A reclusive billionaire staged a breakdown in his town, all to test the one man her late husband ever called good. She never expected the truth he was guarding. The engine died with a cough, a final metallic shudder that felt entirely too rehearsed. Annelise waited for the silence to settle, a thick blanket of unfamiliar sound in the late afternoon heat. Crickets. The rustle of wind through dry grass. Nothing else. She had orchestrated this failure with the same precision she applied to a corporate acquisition. The car, a modest sedan purchased for cash 2 towns over, had been serviced by a mechanic who understood discretion and the art of the controlled demise. A specific wire frayed just so. A slow leak in a hose that would give out after approximately 150 miles. It had performed flawlessly. She sat for a moment, her hands resting on the cheap plastic of the steering wheel. Her name was Anna for the next 48 hours. Her wallet contained $73 and a fake driver's license. Her clothes were from a discount store, chosen for their deliberate lack of distinction. They felt like a costume. They were a costume. This was a pilgrimage, an audit, a final, posthumous request from a man who had dealt only in demands. Arthur's last letter had been waiting for her on his desk, a single sheet of heavy cream stationery. His handwriting, usually an aggressive scrawl, was frail, thin. It spoke of regrets, a concept so alien to him it was like reading a foreign language, and it spoke of a man, a woodworker in a town called Oakhaven, Caleb Vance, the only truly good man I ever knew, Arthur had written. Find him. See for yourself. Then you'll understand the trust. The trust was a labyrinth of legal clauses and financial instruments that effectively diverted a third of his fortune. It was an entity with no clear purpose, its activation contingent on her judgment. A judgment she was now here to form. Annelise opened the car door. The heat was a physical weight. The road was empty, a ribbon of cracked asphalt stretching through fields of sun-bleached gold. In the distance she saw the silhouette of a small town. Oakhaven. She began to walk. The dust from the shoulder of the road coated her practical, uncomfortable shoes. She focused on the mechanics of the act. Left foot, right foot. Breathe in, breathe out. It was a problem to be solved, a variable to be controlled. The town revealed itself slowly. A faded water tower, a cluster of single-story buildings with peeling paint, a general store with a screen door that sighed shut. It was a place untouched by the world she inhabited, a world of glass towers and silent electric cars. She found the workshop easily. It was the only one. Vance Woodworking. The letters were carved into a heavy oak sign, elegant and understated. The building was an old barn, its red paint faded to the color of dried blood. The wide doors were open, spilling golden light and the scent of sawdust and cedar onto the gravel drive. Inside, a man was working. He stood with his back to her, bent over a workbench. He was tall, with broad shoulders that strained the fabric of a simple grey t-shirt. His focus was absolute, his movements economical and precise as he planed a long piece of dark wood. The only sound was the rhythmic scrape of steel on timber. She stood at the edge of the light, an observer. She catalogued him. Strong hands, calloused, faded jeans, work boots. No sign of the goodness Arthur had written about. Just a man, working. He must have sensed her presence. He stopped, his body going still without turning around. 2 seconds of silence. Long ones. He placed the plane on the bench with a quiet click and turned. His face was angular, weathered. His eyes were a startlingly clear blue, and they held a deep, unnerving stillness. They took her in without judgment, without surprise, as if a woman appearing out of nowhere was an ordinary occurrence. "My car broke down," she said, the words feeling clumsy in her mouth. About a mile back. He nodded slowly, his gaze shifting past her toward the road, as if he could see the disabled vehicle from here. Old blue sedan? Yes, she confirmed, a flicker of surprise breaking through her composure. He had seen her. He had seen her and kept working. He wiped his hands on a rag, the movement unhurried. I'll get the truck. There was no negotiation, no suspicion, just a simple declaration of intent. She followed him as he walked to an old, dented pickup truck parked beside the barn. It was the color of a faded sky, its body a roadmap of a hard-lived life. He moved with a quiet confidence that was entirely at odds with his surroundings. He didn't speak on the drive. Annelise found the silence unnerving. Her world was filled with noise, with agendas and negotiations disguised as conversation. This quiet was different. It wasn't empty. It felt solid, weighted. They found the car exactly where she had left it. He got out, inspected the engine with an expert's eye, and confirmed what she already knew. It wasn't starting. He hooked it to his truck with a practiced efficiency. He worked with a focus that left no room for small talk. Annelise stood by the side of the road, a spectator in her own play. Back at the workshop, he maneuvered the sedan into a space beside the barn. I can look at it in the morning, he said. It's too late to do much now. I don't have much money, she lied, testing the first plank of his character. I can pay for the tow, but the repairs might have to wait. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. His gaze wasn't pitying, it was just observant. Land doesn't rush, he said, his voice a low rumble. Neither does an engine. We'll figure it out tomorrow. He turned to go back into his workshop. Is there a motel in town? She asked, playing her part. There is, but the innkeeper's out of town until Friday. His sister's sick. The complication was unexpected, a flaw in her planning. A small frown creased his brow. He seemed to be weighing a problem. You can use the phone inside. Call someone. There's no one to call, she said, the lie tasting like ash. The silence stretched again. He looked at the setting sun, at the long shadows creeping across the gravel. He sighed, a soft sound of resignation. There's a room above the shop. My wife. She used it as a studio. It's simple, but it's clean. You can stay the night. Annelise felt a jolt. This was not part of the plan. Proximity was a risk. It was also an opportunity. I couldn't impose. It's not an imposition, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. It's a room. He led her through the workshop. The air was thick with the clean, sharp scent of wood. Tools hung in precise order on the walls, their metal surfaces gleaming in the low light. It was a space of discipline and creation. In the center of the room stood a half-finished cradle. The wood was pale, almost white, and it curved in elegant, gentle lines. It was a piece of breathtaking skill, but it was the design that stopped her. It was familiar. She had seen its lines before. In a heavy oak desk that sat in her penthouse study, the only piece of furniture Arthur had ever commissioned, the only object he had ever seemed to truly value. The joinery, the subtle, unexpected curve of the legs. It was the same artistic signature. This was him, Caleb Vance. He saw her looking at it. For a client, he said, a hint of something, pride, perhaps, in his voice. It's beautiful. The words were true, stripped of all artifice. He just nodded, accepting the compliment as a simple fact. He led her to a narrow staircase at the back of the workshop. The room upstairs was sparse. A bed, a small table, a single chair. A large window looked out over the fields. The walls were bare except for faint charcoal outlines of sketches that had long since been removed. The ghost of a life. "The bathroom is down the hall," he said, his voice softer now. "I live in the house behind the shop. If you need anything, just knock." He turned to leave. "Thank you," she said. He paused at the door. He didn't turn around. "Get some rest," he said. Then he was gone. Annelise stood in the center of the room, the scent of turpentine and old paint clinging to the air. The test had become something else. She was inside his life now, a variable he had to manage. She looked out the window. The sun had set, leaving a bruised purple sky. In the distance, the lights of a small house blinked on. His house. She felt a sudden, sharp pang of something she couldn't name. It wasn't fear. It was dislocation. She had stepped out of her own life and into the quiet, ordered world of the one man her brilliant, ruthless husband had called good, and she had no idea what she would find here. Sleep did not come easily. The bed was soft, but her mind was a hard, angular thing, turning over the day's events. The man's quiet competence, his unnerving calm, the cradle, the desk. The next morning she woke to the sound of a child's laughter. It was a bright, clear sound that cut through the morning stillness. Annelise rose and went to the window. In the yard between the workshop and the house, Caleb was pushing a little girl on a simple rope swing tied to the thick branch of an oak tree. The girl couldn't have been more than 6 or 7. She had dark hair that flew out behind her as she soared into the air. Her laughter was pure, uninhibited joy. Caleb's face was transformed. The stoic mask was gone. In its place was a look of such profound, gentle love that it made Annelise feel like an intruder. He was smiling, a real smile that reached his clear blue eyes. This was a complication she hadn't anticipated. A child, a daughter. She dressed in another set of anonymous clothes and went downstairs. The workshop was empty. The air was cool and smelled of the morning dew. She stepped outside. The girl saw her first. She stopped laughing and pointed, her small legs dragging on the ground to slow the swing. "Daddy, there's a lady." Caleb stopped pushing and turned. He looked at Annelise, his face settling back into its neutral, observant expression. The smile was gone, tucked away. "This is Lily," he said. "Lily, this is—" "Anna," she supplied quickly. Lily slid off the swing and stood half-hidden behind her father's legs, peering at Annelise with wide, curious eyes. They were his eyes, clear and blue. Annelise had never been good with children. They were unpredictable, illogical. She had no framework for dealing with them. She offered a small, hesitant smile. Lily did not smile back. She studied Annelise with a solemn intensity. Then she stepped forward, her small hand outstretched. In it was a crumpled piece of paper. She held it out to Annelise. "For you," she said, her voice a tiny whisper. Annelise took it. She unfolded the paper. It was a drawing, a child's scrawl in bright crayon, a wobbly-winged bird, colored a vibrant, impossible shade of blue. "Thank you," Annelise said, the words feeling inadequate. "It's a beautiful bird." Lily beamed, her shyness vanishing. "It's a bluebird," she announced proudly. "They bring happiness." Annelise looked from the drawing to the child's hopeful face. A simple, non-transactional gift, an offering of happiness. It was so foreign to her experience that she felt a physical jolt, a crack in the armor she wore so tightly. Caleb watched the exchange, his expression unreadable. "I made coffee," he said, breaking the spell. "In the house. You must be hungry." Annelise hesitated. The house was another level of intrusion. "It's just coffee," he said, as if sensing her reluctance. The kitchen was warm and clean. It was a simple room, with worn wooden cabinets and a sturdy table in the center. It was clearly a man's kitchen, functional, uncluttered. but there were touches of something else. A small vase of wildflowers on the windowsill, a row of colorful, childish paintings taped to the refrigerator. He poured her a mug of coffee. It was black and strong. "I'll take a look at your car after I drop Lily at school," he said. Annelise nodded, cradling the warm mug in her hands. She felt the child's drawing in her pocket, a small, crinkly square. A bridge had been extended, not by the man she had come to test, but by his daughter. Later that day, while Caleb was gone, Annelise took a walk into town. It was an intelligence-gathering mission. She needed more data. The general store was run by a woman with kind eyes and a cloud of white hair. "Martha." "New in town?" the woman asked, her voice warm. "Just passing through," Annelise said. "My car broke down. A man named Caleb Vance is helping me." Martha's smile softened. "Caleb's a good man, the best. It was a hard thing what happened." "What happened?" Annelise asked, keeping her tone casual. "His wife, Elena." The woman sighed, her gaze distant. She was a firefly, that one. So bright. An artist. She came from the city with him. He was a big-shot architect back then, you know. Designed those fancy glass buildings. But he gave it all up to come back here where he grew up. Said he wanted to build things that would last. Things with soul. This was new information. An architect. It explained the desk, the cradle, the inherent grace in his work. He wasn't just a country carpenter. He was a man who had chosen this life. A man who had walked away from a world not unlike her own. Martha continued, her voice lower now. "Elena died a few years back. An accident. A terrible, senseless thing. He hasn't been the same since. He just pours everything into his work and into that little girl." Annelise left the store with a new piece of the puzzle. A dead wife. A former life. The picture of Caleb Vance was becoming more complex, layered with shadows she hadn't expected. When she returned to the workshop, her phone buzzed. It was a text from a secure number. David, her lawyer and confidant. "Call me. Urgent." She walked out into the fields behind the workshop, ensuring she was alone. The signal was weak, but it held. "What is it, David?" "It's Richard," he said, his voice tight with concern. "Richard Thorne, the senior board member. He's making inquiries about Arthur's estate, specifically the Oakhaven Trust. He's saying Arthur was not of sound mind, that you're exercising undue influence. He's preparing a challenge." Annelise felt a cold knot form in her stomach. Richard was a shark, a man molded in Arthur's own image but without any of the latent, buried conscience. He can't do that. Arthur's directives were ironclad. "He's looking for leverage," David said. "He knows you're off the grid. He's hired a private investigator to find you. Annelise, he's not just trying to secure the money. He wants control of everything." The manufactured test had just collided with a very real threat. "Keep him busy," she ordered. "File a counter-motion. Bury him in paperwork. I need more time." "Time for what?" "To understand," she said, and ended the call. She turned back toward the workshop. The idyllic, quiet world she had stepped into now felt fragile, threatened. Richard's world, her world, was reaching its tendrils into this place. The next day, a stranger appeared in town. He was a man in a cheap suit that didn't fit the rural landscape. He asked questions at the general store. About a woman, a broken-down car. Martha, loyal and wise, told him nothing, but she called Caleb. Caleb found Annelise by the creek that ran behind his property. He didn't mention the phone call. "There's a man in town," he said, his voice flat. "Asking about you." Annelise's heart hammered against her ribs. "He knows. He doesn't look like a friend." "He's not," she admitted. Caleb studied her, his blue eyes searching her face. You're in some kind of trouble, aren't you? This isn't about a broken car. It's complicated." He was silent for a long moment. He looked at the water flowing over the smooth stones. "Most people only see what's flowering," he said quietly. "They miss what's moving underneath." He turned back to her. "You can't stay at the inn when it reopens. He'll be waiting." Her carefully constructed plan was falling apart. She was exposed, vulnerable. "You should stay here," he said, "in the studio, until he leaves." "Why?" she asked, genuinely bewildered. "Why would you help me? You don't know me." He met her gaze, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of something beyond his calm reserve. A deep, resonant sadness. "I know what it's like to have your world fall apart," he said. "Everyone deserves a safe place to stand while it does." So she stayed. The arrangement shifted from a one-night necessity to an open-ended refuge. She was a guest in his quiet life. The forced proximity created a strange, unspoken intimacy. She watched him with Lily, saw the way he braided her hair with clumsy, gentle fingers. She ate at his table, the simple meals of bread and soup feeling more nourishing than any gourmet food she had ever tasted. She helped him in the garden, her manicured hands sinking into the rich, dark earth. She learned the rhythms of his days, the early morning work in the shop, the walk to the school bus with Lily, the quiet evenings spent reading on the porch. One evening, as they sat in the gathering dusk, she found the courage to ask, "Martha told me about your wife." Caleb went still. He stared out at the darkening fields, his profile etched against the twilight. "Her name was Eleanor," he said, his voice barely a whisper. He didn't say more, but in the silence, Annelise felt the vast, empty space her absence had left behind. The next day, driven by a need she didn't fully understand, she cleaned the studio. In a dusty corner under a canvas drop-cloth, she found a wooden chest. It wasn't locked. Inside were Elena's things, sketchbooks filled with drawings of birds, of Lily's baby face, of Caleb's hands, and beneath them a portfolio. It contained architectural drawings, not his, hers, and a slim file folder. Annelise's hands trembled as she opened it. It was a collection of documents, internal memos, engineering reports, all related to the construction of the Meridian Tower, a high-profile commercial building in the city, a building that had suffered a partial structural failure 5 years ago, a collapse that had killed 3 people, a project developed by a subsidiary of Atlantic Holdings, her husband's company. The blood drained from her face. She sank onto the floor, the papers spread around her. It was all there. Warnings about substandard materials, rushed safety inspections, all of it signed off by a project manager eager to meet a deadline. A manager who reported to the subsidiary's CEO, Richard Thorne. She flipped to the last page. A list of the victims. Elena Vance, age 32. She had been visiting a gallery on the ground floor. The truth was a physical blow. Arthur's letter wasn't about goodness, it was about guilt. His admiration for Caleb was an atonement. He had known his empire had killed this man's wife, shattered his life, and he had done nothing. No, that wasn't right. He had done something. He had created the trust. A silent, massive apology he was too proud or too cowardly to make in person. She heard footsteps on the stairs. Caleb stood in the doorway, his face pale. He had seen the open chest. I'm sorry," she stammered, feeling like a thief. He looked at the papers in her lap, his expression hardening into something she had never seen before. A cold, quiet grief. "She was a researcher before she was an artist," he said, his voice hollow. "She knew something was wrong with that building. She was gathering proof. She believed if people knew the truth, they would have to do the right thing. He sank down, leaning against the doorframe, his strength finally deserting him. She was wrong. Annelise looked at the man, broken by a corporate negligence she had unknowingly profited from her entire adult life. The test was over. The game was over. "My name isn't Anna," she said, her voice shaking. "It's Annelise. Annelise Sterling." He showed no reaction. The name clearly meant nothing to him. "My husband was Arthur Sterling." This time she saw a flicker of recognition in his eyes. He knew the name of the man at the top of the pyramid, the man ultimately responsible. "I didn't know," she whispered, "about any of this. He left me a letter. He told me to find you. He said you were a good man. He left a trust. I think it was for you. For this." Caleb was silent for a long time. The crickets outside filled the void. "I don't want his money," he said finally, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "It won't bring her back." "No, it won't," she agreed. "But it can bring justice." He looked at her then, he truly looked at her. The woman from the broken-down car was gone. In her place was someone else. Someone with a fire in her eyes. "What are you talking about?" "The man who oversaw that project, who signed off on those reports," she said, her voice gaining strength. "His name is Richard Thorne, and right now he is trying to take control of my husband's company." Caleb stared at her, the pieces clicking into place. "He gave me the evidence," she continued, gesturing to the file. "And you have the story. Together, we can make them listen." For the first time since she had arrived, Annelise saw a spark of the man he must have been before his world had ended. A fighter. He stood up, his body seeming to regain its solid, grounded strength. He took a deep breath. "All right," he said. "Tell me the plan." The transition was jarring. One day she was Anna, a woman with $73 to her name. The next, she was Annelise Sterling, a phantom of immense power, directing a war from a small room above a woodworking shop. Her first call was to David. "I need everything you have on Richard Thorne's tenure as CEO of the development subsidiary," she commanded, her voice crisp and authoritative, a tone she hadn't used in weeks. "Financials, project oversight reports, personnel files. And I need you to schedule an emergency board meeting, in person, 72 hours from now." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Annelise, is that you? You sound different." "I am," she said. Caleb watched her, a silent partner in this strange alliance. He saw the shift, the way she moved with a newfound purpose. The hesitant, out-of-place woman was gone, replaced by a strategist, a queen moving her pieces across the board. He gave her Elena's original files, including a small encrypted USB drive that had been tucked into the portfolio. It contained copies of emails, damning correspondence between Thorne and the project manager. "This is everything she had," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of the past. "I tried once, with a lawyer. They buried us. They said these documents were inadmissible, probably forged. We didn't have the resources to fight." "We do now," Annelise said, her hand closing around the drive. Her hand closed around the page hard enough to crease it. The investigator in town disappeared as quickly as he had arrived, likely recalled by Thorne, who now had a much bigger problem to deal with. The threat had shifted from the physical world to the corporate one. The day before she was to leave, Lily gave her another drawing. This one was of two people, a tall stick figure and a smaller one, holding hands under a smiling sun. A man and his daughter, but next to them she had drawn a third figure, a woman with a scribble of blonde hair. She had drawn Annelise into their family. Annelise folded the paper carefully and placed it in her pocket next to the drawing of the bluebird. They were the most valuable things she owned. Caleb drove her to a regional airport 2 hours away, where a private jet, summoned by David, was waiting. They stood on the tarmac, the roar of the engines a stark contrast to the quiet life she was leaving behind. "You don't have to do this," he said. "It's not your fight." "Your wife tried to do the right thing," Annelise replied, meeting his gaze. "She was killed by my husband's company. That makes it my fight." He nodded, a quiet understanding passing between them. "Will you be there?" she asked. "At the meeting?" He hesitated. "I'm not a part of that world." "They need to see you," she said. "They need to see the man they have to answer to." He gave a slow, deliberate nod. "I'll be there." She boarded the plane without looking back. The ascent was fast and smooth. Below her, the patchwork of fields and small towns shrank until it was nothing but an abstraction. She was returning to her world, but she was no longer the same person who had left it. The boardroom was a cold, sterile space on the 50th floor of the Sterling Tower. A long, polished mahogany table reflected the grim faces of the board members. Richard Thorne sat at the opposite end from Arthur's empty chair, a smug, predatory confidence radiating from him. He thought he had won. Annelise entered, and a hush fell over the room. She was dressed in a severe, dark suit, her hair pulled back. She was the image of the unapproachable, powerful widow they all remembered. But her eyes were different. They held a new clarity, a cold fire. Behind her, another man entered. Caleb. He was dressed in a simple, dark suit that looked alien on his frame, but he wore it with a quiet dignity. He did not look intimidated by the wealth and power in the room. He looked like a man made of stone. He took a seat against the wall, a silent, watchful presence. Richard sneered. "Annelise, and you've brought a friend. How quaint." Annelise ignored him. She took her place at the head of the table in Arthur's chair. "I've called this meeting to discuss the future of this company," she began, her voice calm and measured. "But to do that, we must first address its past." She looked directly at Richard Thorne, specifically the Meridian Tower project. A flicker of alarm crossed Thorne's face, but he quickly masked it. That was a tragedy, of course, but it was fully investigated. The company was cleared of all wrongdoing. "Was it?" Annelise asked softly. She placed a single file on the table. David, standing behind her, began distributing copies to the board members. "These are internal memos from the project," she explained. "Memos you signed, Richard. They detail the use of substandard steel supports to cut costs." Thorne's face paled. "Forgeries. Slander. Are they?" She pressed a button, and a large screen on the wall came to life. Emails appeared, Thorne's emails, arguing with the lead engineer, ordering him to approve the materials. The board members began to murmur, their faces a mixture of shock and dawning horror. "This is corporate malfeasance, Richard," Annelise continued, her voice like ice. "It's gross negligence. It's manslaughter." She paused, letting the weight of the words settle in the silent room. "3 people died because of your greed. One of them was Elena Vance." She gestured to Caleb. "Her husband, Caleb Vance, is here with us today. He is the man this company tried to silence." All eyes turned to Caleb. He met their gazes without flinching, his presence a quiet, powerful indictment. He was the human cost of their balance sheets. Thorne stood up, his face purple with rage. "This is an ambush. Lies. You have no proof." "I have her research," Annelise said. "I have your emails, and I have a sworn affidavit from the lead engineer who has been living with his guilt for 5 years and is now willing to testify." Checkmate. Richard Thorne crumbled. His power, built on a foundation of lies and intimidation, evaporated under the harsh light of the truth. He sank back into his chair, a defeated man. The board moved swiftly. Thorne was removed, effective immediately. Security was called to escort him from the building, a silent, ignominious exit. In the ensuing chaos, Annelise stood. "My husband left a significant portion of his assets in a blind trust," she announced to the stunned board. "I am now activating it. It will be used to establish the Elena Vance Foundation, dedicated to ensuring ethical building practices and providing restitution to all victims of this company's past negligence. We will right these wrongs. This will be our new legacy." It was a declaration, not just of intent, but of transformation. She was using Arthur's power to dismantle the very ruthlessness that had built it. It was a final, perfect act of atonement. After the meeting, she and Caleb stood in the vast, empty office that had been Arthur's. The city sprawled below them, a glittering monument to ambition and power. "Thank you," he said. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of 5 years of unresolved grief. She just nodded, unable to speak. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object. He placed it on the desk. It was a bird carved from a piece of pale, smooth wood. Its wings were outstretched, ready for flight. "A bluebird. For happiness," he said. Then he turned and walked away, leaving her alone with the ghost of her husband and the promise of a new beginning. The months that followed were a whirlwind of managed deconstruction. Annelise dismantled her old life with the same methodical precision she had used to expose Richard Thorne. She sold the penthouse, the art collection, the symbols of a life that no longer felt like her own. She poured her energy into the foundation, working with David to build it from the ground up. It became a powerful force for change in the industry, a watchdog armed with the sterling fortune and an unshakable moral compass. She found a new CEO to run the main corporation, a woman with a reputation for integrity. Annelise Sterling, the reclusive billionaire, faded from the society pages. She became a different kind of power, one that worked quietly behind the scenes. She kept the 2 drawings from Lily and the small wooden bird on her new, much smaller desk. They were her anchors, her true north. One crisp autumn afternoon, when the work was settled and the foundation was running under its own momentum, she got in her car. It was not a luxury sedan or the cheap disposable car from her test. It was a simple, reliable vehicle, bought for its utility, not its status. She drove. She didn't use GPS. She knew the way by heart. She found Oakhaven sleeping in the golden afternoon light. It was unchanged. The general store's screen door still sighed shut. The water tower still stood sentinel against the wide blue sky. She drove to the workshop. Caleb's truck was parked in its usual spot. The big barn doors were open. She could hear the faint, rhythmic scrape of a tool on wood. She got out of the car. The air smelled of wood smoke and damp leaves. He was on the porch of the small house, sitting in a rocking chair. Lily was beside him, concentrating on a drawing. He was sanding a piece of wood, his hands moving with their familiar, steady grace. He looked up as she approached, his hands going still. There was no surprise in his eyes, only a quiet, patient recognition, as if he had been waiting. Lily saw her, and her face broke into a wide, joyful grin. "Anna!" she yelled, scrambling up and running to her. She had called her Anna, a name that was both a fiction and, somehow, the truest version of herself. Annelise knelt and hugged the little girl, a gesture that felt as natural as breathing. Caleb rose from his chair and walked to the edge of the porch steps. He didn't smile, but the stillness in his face had been replaced by something else. Something softer, hopeful. "You came back," he said. It wasn't a question. "I came back," she confirmed. They stood in a comfortable silence, the late afternoon sun warming their faces. Lily tugged on Annelise's hand, pulling her toward the house. Inside, the kitchen was filled with the smell of baking bread. A life was here. A real one. Built of simple, sturdy things. Caleb followed them in. He picked up a small, intricately carved box from the counter. It was made of the same dark wood as Arthur's desk. "I finished this for you," he said, holding it out to her. She took it. The wood was warm and smooth beneath her fingertips. She opened it. Inside, nestled on a bed of dark velvet, was a single, perfectly rendered wooden feather. "It was for the bluebird," he said, "so it can fly." Her fingers brushed against his as she took the feather. The contact was brief, accidental but electric, a spark in the quiet space between them. She looked from the feather to his face, and she saw her future. It wasn't in a boardroom or a penthouse. It was here, in the quiet strength of this man, in the laughter of his child, in a life built not of steel and glass, but of wood and heart. Some legacies are written in stock tickers and steel. The best ones are carved in wood and measured in the quiet space between two hands finally willing to meet.